you didn't get efficient buildings with great air and great sort of, human elements and environmental elements, whatever, by putting recycle bins and polluting buildings. You had to have a new blueprint.
Sure.
And candidly, a lot of the so-called innovation in healthcare is the equivalent of putting recycle bins and polluting buildings and calling them green. You have to do a reset. And healthcare goes through major resets every 50 to 70 years. We're overdue. And candidly, in my opinion, beyond the clinicians we have, there's almost nothing that is worth saving about the status quo. It is radically broken. The first chapter of the CEO's Guide is we've gone to war for less than what the status quo healthcare system has done to America. That's my case for change, taking the negative side of it. And so you need to build a new model that renders the old obsolete. You didn't get the iPhone by tweaking an IBM mainframe, and it's that kind of change.
Welcome to the RockstarsRocking podcast, powered by Voluntary Disruption, a show dedicated to people who are crushing their business and life goals. These are bite-sized conversations with leading rock stars in their respective industry who are pumped to share their story to help drive you to the next level. So, are you ready to rock? Speaking of rock stars, here's your host, Eric Silverman.
Hey, rock stars, welcome back to another episode of Rockstars Rocking, where we always only have the most successful rock stars who are rocking it, doing well in their business, their personal, their life, doing well for the community, the world, you name it. And today I'm super fired up, super pumped and excited to have our good friend Dave Chase, who is founder or co-founder, co-CEO of Health Rosetta. Dave Chase is based out of the greater Seattle area. We just talked about that. The same way I don't say I'm from where I'm from. I always say Baltimore. He always says Seattle because it's easier to explain. Dave, welcome to the show, man. I'm excited to have you on.
Yeah, thanks. Excited for the chat. Fire away.
Absolutely, man. So for those in the employee benefits or in the insurance world, I suspect most people know your name and have heard you speak, and most probably have read your books. But just in case, let me make sure everybody remembers and knows Dave is the author of 3 best-selling books over the last 4 years: The CEO's Guide to Restoring the American Dream, The Opioid Crisis Wake-Up Call, Healthcare is Stealing the American Dream, Here's How We Take It Back, and then most recently last year, Relocalizing Health, the future of healthcare is local, open and independent. So Dave Chase, my friend, I'm so pumped. Let me ask you a question. You call yourself the chief archaeologist of the Health Rosetta. Tell me why you're using that title, because it certainly draws my attention.
Yeah, I mean, it's something where I didn't have to climb to the top of some mountain and dream the stuff up that we're, talking about with Health Rosetta. I've just basically been digging, around the country, around the world. People are problem solvers wherever, right? To tough problems. Mm-hmm. And so, and with the Health Rosetta, or with the Rosetta, metaphor, seemed kind of appropriate to be an archaeologist, dig for those solutions, find out who's cracked the code. And then once to do that, then turn into Johnny Appleseed and start to spread the word around the country.
So you've heard this question before, and I've asked it to others, but I want to hear your interpretation of it. Is the United States healthcare system actually broken? Is it broken?
I tend to believe the people who say, it's not broken, it was designed this way. It's giving us exactly what the incentives are driven towards driving it. So it's clearly falling short of what we're capable of. And it's this interesting, even to call it a healthcare system is probably a misnomer. And even within the health plan arena that we often live in, we don't have one model. We actually have thousands, if not millions, when you add in all the employer plans, let alone the big buckets of Medicare, Medicaid, and all that. And so we have both the best and worst system, depending on which flavor you have.
Yeah, and I assumed you would kind of go down that road, and I wanted you to, because I do agree, for everybody that talks about how, our system's not broken. It's doing exactly what it was originally intended and designed to do. So I agree with that. But certainly, your fight that I'd love to dig into, to use that term, dig, is how to fix it, or to make it better for employers and employees alike, the consumers. The end user, after all, is the employee consumer, the healthcare consumer. So let me ask you this. Let's start with the basics for anybody listening who may not be familiar with benefits or insurance in general, but they're fascinated with those of us like yourself who know we can fix it, who we can make it better. So start by telling us the overall mission or understanding of what Health Rosetta is as a certification and why it's so important.
Yeah, I mean, it's really our plan, very big picture is about saving lives and communities by empowering community-owned health plans. And that's our moniker for what we've found works around the world. And so what we've done is really built a community and technology platform that allows the people who architect the plans to build entirely new and exponentially more health plans that are purpose-built for the chronic disease era, as opposed to the legacy status quo plans are really optimized for kind of the communicable disease and acute care that was present 50 years ago. And then when you do that and you tailor it to the unique needs of that community, whether it's a fractal community like an employer or a place-based community, the result is dramatically improved health outcomes, which is the most important thing. The happy coincidence is when you do that, you spend 20 to 50% less per capita than the status quo. And so we do that by codifying rare insight, encoding it into an operational excellence platform, and then distribute it through an aligned set of advisors. And that's really been the tip of the spear for us, is who are those folks that have built their business around aligned interest, around transparency, around integrity. And we love working with those people, and they're probably the most underestimated people in the entire US economy.
So for those that are interested in looking it up, you can go to healthrosetta.org. Health Rosetta, Rosetta spelled with 2 T's, healthrosetta.org. So let me dig a little bit deeper into the creation of Health Rosetta, because I've never heard this story. You have a co-founder, Sean, is it Shanson?
Yep.
How did you guys get connected and put this thing together? Where did that idea come from? Where did that spark come from?
Yeah, I mean, the spark, in terms of with Sean, we got introduced through a mutual friend, investor, in the healthcare arena. But the Health Rosetta journey actually started well before that with my previous company, which is called Avado, that was acquired and integrated into WebMD. It was through that journey that I found that there was this weird dichotomy between, frankly, a dystopian reality of where we're at today with our healthcare system. It's brutal for patients, it's brutal for the caregivers, it's producing, terrible outcomes, and it's bankrupting families in the country. And then on the other hand, and really the software company was around working with the next generation healthcare delivery organizations and what they needed. By comparison, it was utopia, right? They focused in on the quadruple aim: improve the care team experience. That naturally leads to a better patient experience. That's when the kind of magic happens. That partnership naturally leads to better outcomes, and the right models that lowers costs. And so I just kind of joke like, wow, this is just a marketing problem, right? Everybody, if they knew about this utopian-like system by comparison, they'd want that. But of course, it's a marketing challenge of the century to get people aware of that. And of course, there's a lot of folks profiting from the dysfunction. And so when my company was acquired, integrated in, and I went through that process, I left, and that was 2015. And I took my family over to Europe. Good chance to think about, okay, what do I want to be when I grow up? And a lot of time reflecting on that and hiking trails around, Italy, and going to the Renaissance and reading about the Enlightenment, and then ended the trip in London. And what I found, right, in this kind of utopian like comparison, was these people who cracked the code. And here I am in the British Museum, and boom, there's the Rosetta Stone. And I'm like, bingo, these people, the Egyptian hieroglyphics were sort of like our healthcare system, sort of indecipherable to the regular mere mortal. And the Rosetta Stone helped decode that because it had 3 languages, including Greek, that sort of could make sense of it. And it's like, okay, I don't know exactly how it's going to manifest itself, but my life calling is to bring this to the world. And then in that journey, I met Sean, and he had it's sort of like an angel list for healthcare and a seed investment fund. And the short version is, I said, hey, if the thesis of this investment fund is the Health Rosetta, I'm in. And so that was actually kind of the first permutation of Health Rosetta, was thinking we'd change things through an investment platform. And we did make some investments, but that's pretty much, wrapped up. And we realized, oh, wow, there was this really important channel of these aligned benefits advisors. Got to change the economic structure. An investment vehicle isn't enough of a change agent to drive that. And so thus, came the Health Rosetta organization that you know about now.
So that's fascinating. I certainly never heard that story. And forgive me, because if it's written somewhere, anywhere, I've never read it. I can fall on my own sword there.
Yeah.
So that's really neat. Let me ask you this. Over the course of the time that Health Rosetta has been around, I've seen it firsthand because I work with a lot of the advisors and partners who could be or should be Health Rosetta and or are Health Rosetta. So the question is, it's become such a powerful certification. I've seen it rise, and it's a great thing to see for the country, quite frankly. How is your certification different than those certifications that are out there that other advisors and consultants and brokers have gotten over the years and still get, whether it be NAHU or any of the many others that are out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to do professional development. We're not
Right.
trying to, knock any of those. But it just became clear at a certain point that this scale of problem is among the great societal challenges that we've tackled or are tackling in our country. And it really is more about a social movement, and so when I started studying social movements and things like LEAD, that really changed as a certification and accreditation organization that really changed the built environment, and that's probably the analogy we've drawn on the most, because I think the built environment, right, all the buildings, the schools, the high rises, office buildings, you name it, they're kind of like healthcare, incredibly local, incredibly entrenched. And there wasn't like some magic day where all the old polluting, inefficient buildings with cruddy air inside of them got raised, and the next day they're all magically green built. The new rose over time, the old waned over time. And what they did was they accredited professionals, and then they certified buildings. And that rippled through the country, and it was probably 10, 20-year journey to fully mainstream that. And so that was kind of the process. Okay, these, they have architects who architect buildings. We have architects who architect plans. And not everybody has this knowledge, is a whole new model. And ultimately, we just, you didn't get efficient buildings with great air and great sort of, human elements and environmental elements, whatever, by putting recycle bins in polluting buildings. You had to have a new blueprint.
Sure.
And candidly, a lot of the so-called innovation in healthcare is the equivalent of putting recycle bins in polluting buildings and calling them green. You have to do a reset. And healthcare goes through major resets every 50 to 70 years. We're overdue. And candidly, in my opinion, beyond the clinicians we have, there's almost nothing that is worth saving about the status quo. It is radically broken. You know, the first chapter of the CEO's Guide is we've gone to war for less than what the status quo healthcare system has done to America. That's my case for change, taking the negative side of it. And so you need to build a new model that renders the old obsolete. You know, you didn't get the iPhone by tweaking an IBM mainframe, and it's that kind of change.
Yeah, I like the way you put that. That's true. And I've never heard it explained with respect to the building analogy and all the examples that you just shared. That's a really good point. So it is a long-term journey, and Health Rosetta is what 6 years and change coming on now, roughly.
About that from the we're going to do that. I mean, incorporation, it's probably 5 years or so.
Yeah.
And then we launched the actual program that people are probably familiar with the launch of the CEO's Guide to Restoring the American Dream, which was around Labor Day of 2017.
Sure. So let me ask you this, because what I've seen and I've heard too is, getting certified to be Health Rosetta or in the group there. It's not easy. You're not accepting everybody. And there's an application process. Can you talk about that, right? So what's the Health Rosetta certification process like? How do you determine who should get in and who shouldn't? Because I can't imagine, or actually I know for a fact, I've had advisors tell me that they applied and they were turned down. And then they're excited to try to reapply and better their game to get in the future.
Yeah, I mean, we want this information out there available for anybody. You don't have to be in our program to apply these principles, and I mean, it sounds a bit grandiose, but if you actually look at the plans that are put in terms of the human impact and health impact, when you have things like proper primary care and centers of excellence, if you could put it into a pill, it would be the blockbuster drug of the century. So to not share that information would be like not sharing the cure for cancer. So when you talk about the program, yes, about 18% of the people who start the process have made it through. We're happy to have more people get through, but we have a pretty stringent requirement. And it's not like, we're sitting there like, for the old timers in some Animal House episode and people's names come up and we're throwing, beer at the screen or something like that. Most people screen themselves out, where we ask for a certain set of things in terms of disclosure and whatnot. And it is, it's a little, it's a lot different, I guess, than a lot of the way the industry operates, where frankly, a lot of people kind of bribed and coerced into selling something, and we're kind of the opposite. So the biggest thing that we screen for isn't track record, although that's super helpful. It's mission alignment. And one of the things that's really interesting is career switchers. And this is a thing when you have an inflection point like we're going through, which is a once in a career inflection point in the industry that I think has really been accelerated by COVID. You have a lot of career switchers. And so you have both kind of mindset career shifters, somebody who's just been selling the old, shifted to the new, but we have doctors, we've got PTs, we've got nurses, we've got former White House senior policy people, management consultants, tech people. And so they don't necessarily have the track record from they put in a plan that reduced spending, improved outcomes. But if we're clear that they really are doing it for the right reasons, we can train them up.
Sure.
And so that's really what we do screen for. And then, we have, we don't have perfect knowledge of what's going on out there in the country. We're never going to bat 1,000 on the people come in, but we rely on people in our community saying, yep, yay, or they're saying the right things, but here's what I actually see.
Sure.
But we don't believe anybody is beyond redemption. And we're not, condemning them or something if they're not in the program. There's many people on their third try, got in. It's great. And part of what they did was, we give them the tools. Often they partner with advisors and co-broker. We've spoken earlier about people like David Contorno and Bryce Heinbaugh and Rachel Means and Scott Haas. They happily co-broker with people.
Sure.
And so there's a way to kind of sort of be halfway in the family, that way. And then, ultimately we want anybody who's mission aligned and really wants to walk the talk, we'd love to have in the program.
So when you guys talk about the application process, is it once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year? And when you do open it up, do you guys have, you and Sean and your board and your team, your executives, do you guys have like I don't know, I'm making this up, a set amount of people, like a college, right? We're only accepting 53 people this year. And is that, can you talk about
No,
that?
we don't have a set number. We do it once a year to answer that question.
Okay.
And it's typically in the first, 3 or 4 months of the calendar year.
Okay.
And like last year, we really aren't trying to grow it per se. We're happy to have it grow, but that's not really the gating factor to driving this movement at the moment. And so we didn't do a lot of push last year. We pretty much just put out to our community, hey, are there any folks you think are great? And we relied a lot on kind of referrals. And so I think we added like 33 people, which was the smallest we'd had in terms of people who made it through.
Now, time out for 1 second. Of those 33, if you don't mind sharing, do you remember off the top about how many people applied? Because you didn't accept everybody.
Yeah. It was, again, a lot of it is people start the process, and it's not like at a certain point, 100 goes to 33 because we blackballed them or something.
Right.
It's more of, we have these education modules you go through, and it's a good chunk of work to go through that. And
sure. It takes commitment.
Yeah, it takes commitment. And that's what gets most people sort of out, if you will. They're like, wow, they actually are doing more than a mail-in diploma,
Right.
And there's a lot of editorial opinion baked into that education thing. We're like, whoa, like maybe that's not for me, or maybe it's for me, but I can't do it within my current firm. Or literally somebody at my firm says, we don't do that, fill in the blank here. And we've had people like Drew Leatherberry, is a good example. He tried to do that at his old firm, and they said, we don't do that shit here. And he's like, okay, see ya. And he hung out his own shingle, and he's kicking butt.
So I love what you said about the mail-in diploma, because that's kind of what I was going for with respect to a lot of, and again, I'm not trying to bash our industry, but I think it applies to really a lot of industries. Short of becoming an actual MD or passing the bar or getting your CPA, I mean, a lot of designations and letters after people's names are pay to play. You just pay the fee and you have the right to use that credential. So that's what I wanted to make sure we drew out, was that that's not the Health Rosetta. And I totally love that. I respect that a lot.
Yeah, no, and at the same time, we want more folks in. And, now and then we'll have people who are already in the program, and they're like, man, you let somebody else, in the program that's in my geography, how dare you? And like,
Really?
wait a second, we never said that. And, I'm thinking of an example. I'm like, okay, you're in a metro area of between 5 and 7 million people. If you're wildly successful, maybe I'd have 100,000 lives.
Right.
This is the Oklahoma land grab. I get it that not everybody has shifted to these models yet, but that's a scarcity mindset, and
Bingo.
that's not aligned. And so we're kind of like, hey, if this isn't for you, that's okay.
Right.
But what I've found when you go through these shifts, and I've said it about Health Rosetta overall, I said, if somebody copied literally everything we're doing to the T and was doing it for the right reasons, I'd say God bless them. Go do it. And particularly if we're not doing a good enough job. But even if we are, we're the outliers. We need more folks doing this and making it comfortable to do that. So that's, again, one of the reasons why we open source what we're doing once we feel it's been battle tested. So there's stuff that's not open source yet. It's kind of open source eventually. But because we're not yet on some elements of it being fully battle tested, I mean, there's a lot of things around vendor agreements and provider agreements that, we have redone these legal underpinnings to the industry. And, we'll eventually make that available to everybody, but it's not battle tested enough yet for that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that scarcity mindset drives me nuts, and I see it all the time. I get messages just on my side of the industry, and I won't talk about that now, but I mean, I do get messages where people are like, wow, you share everything in articles and books and videos and speeches and talks around the country. Aren't you nervous that, a competitor is going to take it and run with it? And my response has always been, no, I'm an abundant thinker. And as you just said, I mean, there's hundreds of millions of people that need help. I can only help this many in the grand scheme of things. So, not to mention, it's all about execution. It's not the idea, it's the execution, as we know. So I think I know the answer, but I'm curious how you phrase it. There, Dave, there are a lot of people out there that preach that they're quote unquote next gen and that they're Health Rosetta-esque, or even they dare say they're Health Rosetta when they're not. How do you handle people claiming to be part of the movement that really aren't? Do you care about them? Do you worry about it? Is there any thought that goes into that?
Yeah, it's a concern, and it's not limited to our arena where good concepts get co-opted by people who just want to preserve the status quo. You've seen that with terms like value-based, that that can easily be thrown around and misused. And so it is a concern, but it's also one that beyond just sort of blatantly lying, and saying they're something that they aren't. We really just try to focus our energy in the positive space. There's a lot of, like buka bashers out there, and it's not like I'm afraid to point out things. Like I mentioned, we've gone to war for less chapter, but if you look at successful social movements, and you take another analogy that I like to use, around the kind of food movement, where there's a lot of focus on organic and local, sustainable, all that. When they were hung up on bashing big food, big ag, big soda, whatever, right? They didn't really make the kind of traction and progress that they have more recently, where they started talking about this food tastes so much better. It's much better for you. It's better for the farmer. It's better for the environment. Like those type of things, that positive space is where we try to operate. And, if somebody is saying something they aren't and misusing the brand or logo, we'll say something.
Sure.
But by and large, the proof will be in the pudding. There's some things we're doing that, where I feel like we've fallen short and need to get better on, is to really distinguish between the people who are, and their work product, right? The work product, and ultimately to get to where LEED went, where they accredited professionals and certified buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, we would like to be able to certify a plan so that you could say, yeah, this is legit and it's validated. We've got the data to back it up. And just like there's a pretty doggone thorough review that LEED reviewers do to say, oh, this is a LEED platinum building, this is a LEED gold building. It's got all these different attributes, and it's energy efficient, the air's good, it's the way it handles water, da 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 da. There's the equivalence here. And so that will be, even within our community, there are people who are much more experienced and have really driven things. And they should get recognized. Excellence should get recognized. And we want to do that. And so that's where we put more of our focus.
I think that would be really cool if you could certify a plan. So in essence, in other words, it sounds like, if I'm an advisor, Health Rosetta advisor, I design a plan for an employer group, and ultimately I'm just theorizing here, but I could send it to you guys, and you evaluate the plan that I designed that the employer likes, and you could, I'm over exaggerating, but you can stamp the approval and say that it's to use your expression, it's gold or platinum certified.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's probably our biggest single platform focus in terms of the technology platform, is bringing that to life,
That'd be
and how you
huge.
can do that.
I like that. I've never heard that before, but that would be really cool. Um, so uh, what about human resources in the employer space and their impact on the employer market? Can you quantify their impact? Because I mean, look, I was literally on an employer call with a broker advisor partner client of mine today, and two calls actually, and one with that employer, with one employer, it was a like aggressive in a good way, excited, passionate, fire in the belly HR person who was excited about change and getting their plan up and running. And we went right after that to another employer group who was the pure, complete definition of the status quo. I'm sorry, I'll say it, the lazy HR person, the person that just doesn't want to do anything and is certainly not going to help move the needle at that group.
Yeah, I mean, the issue with HR is they're generally under-resourced, right? They've got a lot on their plate. They're dealing with everything from COVID to OSHA to recruiting to whatever. And 30 years ago, when healthcare costs were minimal, it was probably looked from a budget standpoint like, I don't know, the holiday party or something, like, hey, keep our people happy, don't get us sued, was
Sure.
kind of the mantra. And so then it became one of many things. And typically the people driven towards HR are amazing human beings, but they're not necessarily analytic, hard driving. And then if they have no resource, you compare it to the retirement benefit side where, in bigger organizations, you have a 401k administrator. And so the if you pull back in the organizations that succeed here, they're the ones who actually believe what they say, which is employees are our most valuable asset. If you believe that, you wouldn't dare keep them in a status quo healthcare plan. As I mentioned earlier, our status quo health plans have, we've gone to war for less, and you take one example, the opioid crisis. That's a gift that our employer health plans gave to us. Think about who's impacted overwhelmingly: working age people or their dependents. Where do those people get their health plan? From their employer. So it was our dollars that funded and fueled that. And so when there's that awakening, right, that, oh my gosh, like, we're in the healthcare business, whether we like it or not, we need to do something different, then I believe that more people will have that fire in the belly. And then, to our earlier point, the people who are lazy should get their asses handed to them in terms of the competitive talent war, right? We should be able to say, I'm looking at this job with ABC Corp and Acme Corp, and they otherwise look the same, but one's got a health plan that is gold and the other is 10 or whatever, would be the opposite. They should lose in the talent war. And I think that was what will get people's attention. Just having an expensive logo on your insurance card doesn't mean you actually have a good health plan, but most people don't know that.
Have you ever heard of or seen the article? It's dated at this point, but in 2005, actually, 2005, Fast Company magazine editorial staff put together this article by the name of "Why We Hate HR." Have you ever read that?
I think I've heard that. I probably read it, but man, it's been a while.
I tell you what, I remember it was a really, really long read. You know how sometimes nowadays it tells you on the article online, it's like 3-minute read, 5-minute
Yeah.
read. I don't know how they figure that out. I guess it's
Yeah.
based on word count. This one must have been at least a 6-hour read. I'm
Oh my
exaggerating, but
God.
I mean, it
Yeah.
was long. The genesis of it was how, decisions are made benefits wise and at the executive level with in a closed boardroom with executives and people in the insurance employee benefits space, and HR is never at the table. The door is locked, it's shut, they're sitting at their cube. It's a very sarcastic written
Yeah.
article. In 2010, same company, Fast Company Magazine, wrote another article called "Why We (parentheses) Shouldn't Hate HR." So anyway, it's just, they're fascinating reads, and they kind of, to me, because I remember them very vividly, they go in the same respect to what we just talked about. They tie together a lot of what you just said. And I agree with what you said, Acme versus ABC Company in the talent war. Um, let me switch gears a little bit, and we'll come back to Health Rosetta in a minute. But talk to me about your TV consulting gig. I'm fascinated by that. I've never
Yeah.
heard of that. I never saw that. And I'd be lying if I said I've watched the Fox show The Resident a lot, but I have seen an episode or two. Can you talk about how that came about? Because that's pretty neat.
Yeah. Um, the Going back to my comment on social movements, if you look at the catalytic moments that shift the public perception, it's when there's some catalytic media moment, with civil rights. It was MLK, the evening news and the morning paper, right? He was probably one of the reasons he stood out was he, amongst civil rights leaders, was he was able to use media in a savvy way. And so I've always felt that that was important. And most of the medical drama genre is largely, like romance and impossible medical situations. The Resident, which is now I think in its fifth season, has really changed the medical genre to get into the business of medicine. And it was just something that happened organically that the creator of the show, Amy Holden Jones, followed me on Twitter. And at some point I was like, I think she might have retweeted or commented, whatever it was. And long story short, it's like, hey, would you like to come in the writer's room and share some of these
Wow.
stories? And so that's kind of what happened. And I go, oh yeah, I got stories. And so you see that in the show from the first season. The one that was most explicitly that came from my contribution was season 3, which was about a surgeon in the real world. The surgeon had billed $84 million that year. In the Resident, they rounded up to 90 million. And there was a lot of great stories around that. And of course, these things get dramatized.
Sure.
But every story that I know about throughout The Resident, even ones that seem pretty crazy, are based on real stories. And
Wow.
the creator is a daughter of a doctor. I mean, I think early on, people thought she was a doctor hater or healthcare hater or something like that. But she just hates the system run amok.
Wow.
And so that was something where I have it somewhere. I don't know where it is. I literally got paid $1. I get paid $1. I'm not doing it to make money. And that's really the negative space, right? We need to make people aware of that. They're getting more and more into the solution side. But I have other things in the works longer term to really shift to the positive space of here's what it could be, right? Rather than what was a moment of awakening for me, March 9th, 2016. How about we have March 9th, 2031, which can be a totally different world. And so that was kind of the backdrop there.
That's really neat. And thank you, Twitter. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so the season 3 long form, the genesis of every episode within season 3 came from a story of yours. But you probably shared enough stories where they could have more seasons like that. That's really neat.
Yeah. I mean, there's like, you'll see little sprinkles of stuff here and there. And, they got great writers and they're creative.
Sure.
And, I'm sure they're getting input from a lot of folks.
Right.
Marty McCary, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, he's contributed a lot, kind of he's one of the original, his book, Unaccountable, was really, and his experience as a resident was one of the key inspirations for the show overall.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. Let me ask you, what's your metric for defining success, both personal success, but also an organization success, be it your own or any organization, for lack of a better way to put it?
Yeah, I mean, at a tactical level, in terms of the organization, our social impact metric is something we call the Health Rosetta Dividend. And
Okay.
that's premised on our belief that the good news is we're already investing more than enough money to not only fund a world-class healthcare system, but to fund or restore funding to what drives 80% of health outcomes. So we have a tax that nobody voted on that's known as $1.5 trillion of waste in our healthcare system that we can redirect to higher and better uses. In terms of the big picture success definition, it's lives impacted, right? What's the ripple effect? And what, in the area that one is called to, like, I believe we were put on this earth with different gifts and different callings. And if you look at the journey that, going back to the screening that we went through, the journey that advisors have gone through that are in our world is, they started their health plan career, it was a job. And then they started to have some success, and and certainly having a job is better than not having a job.
Most of them started that job as an accident, if you ask them. They accidentally found their way into the benefits world. That's how I got in.
Yeah, it's just a job. You needed to make a living, whatever happenstance. But at a certain point, it became a career. You kind of know what you're doing. You're having some success, and a career is much better than a job. But far better than a career is a calling, and that's what increasingly we see people go through. When it's a calling, it's why you were put here, and you can deal with all kinds of adversity and obstacles when it's your calling. And it's like, yeah, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be on this earth, but hopefully it's some decades. So I can actually play a multi-decade game, if you will. And that's really the only advantage we have against the status quo. They're chasing their tails on quarterly and 12-month cycles. And we're trying to change the country. And that's not an easy thing. That is going to take 10 or 20 years. You bet we can make big impacts on these fractal communities, like an employee, 100 employees here, 1,000 here, 50 there, 700 there. And that's very fulfilling. And that's continues to be fuel on the fire, right? Of you get those stories of what a difference it is for people. It's incredibly motivating and inspiring to keep going in spite of the blowback that you inevitably get when you're trying to change anything.
It reminds me of, I don't know if you've read the book, but I know a lot of folks listening probably have, Simon Sinek's The Infinite Game.
Yep.
And what you kind of described is literally what I remember from the book, in that you can't live month to month, quarter to quarter, even year to year. It's got to be the long game. It's got to be something that continues even after you're not with the company or even on the earth. It's got to continue that mission. So I agree.
Actually, our summit 2 years ago, I presented on the Infinite Game and sort of our play on that. Yeah,
I didn't know that, but yeah. So good. We're aligned with that. So as we start to wrap up, there's a couple of quick things I'd love to chat about if you still have a couple minutes. One, can you tell us in your own words why I call it the Rosen story, what that means and why that's so impactful and why everybody in the country should know about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the inspiration for our mission and purpose. The Health Rosetta Dividend I was just mentioning, they're the example of that, where they've cumulatively saved $500 million versus benchmarked against their competitor.
And tell everybody who Rosen is and what we're talking about.
So they're a hotel and resort company out of Orlando. about 5,000 employees or so. But when they started this journey, they were probably 500. And at a certain point, they opted out of the status quo, built their own primary care model, evolved from there, and then have cumulatively saved $500 million. That allowed them to grow without taking on massive debt. During COVID, they were the only major hotel to not completely shut early in COVID. Of course, they took a hit like everybody, and they're probably continue to take a hit, but it gave them resilience. But the cool thing about that is, of course, it's great for the business to save now $500 million. But the really meaningful part of that is they're able to provide the best health benefits package in the country that I've ever heard of. Not only is great health plan, the stuff we call Health Rosetta, which they were doing before there was a Health Rosetta. In a lot of ways, they were one of the models there too. But they not only provide these great health benefits, but they pay for their employees and their employees' kids' college education with a fraction of the savings. And if that wasn't enough, they took a once crime-ridden neighborhood and said, we're going to invest in kids and education. And, long story short, it's the epilogue in my last book, which I call The Future We Choose, that goes into this. They fund, preschool, after-school programs. So far, nearly 500 college educations, crimes down 80%, high school graduation rates dramatically spiked to some years they hit 100% or darn near. Their 4-year college achievement, even though they're a first quartile income community, which would say that they would have a chance of 4-year college achievement, either 8 or 9%, they are higher than the highest fourth quartile income communities in terms of college achievement. And the total investment was less than 5% of that Health Rosetta dividend. And then they've adopted a neighborhood 5 times that size. And now there's another hotel company that has followed their lead. So it's that type of thing. Not only have they done that, but they're very open about it. To our earlier discussion, there's too many people in this industry if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, that's Gollum mentality. There's like My Little Precious they want to hold on to. They're like, no, this is incredibly impactful. We'll share it with anybody. That was part of our summit, going to their clinic, speaking with Mr. Rosen, who's behind this, and with members of his community and the people who actually run the plan, both on the medical side and the risk management side. And it's incredibly inspiring. And if every employer did what they're doing, this would be like a recurring $500 billion stimulus in our economy every year.
Wow. And it's the definition of what we talked about too, infinite game. He's created it, Mr. Rosen, to, when he's no longer around, it's going to continue, which is exactly what you need and exactly what you want. I can't imagine them bringing on a new leader that would disassemble everything that they've worked for so long.
Right. I mean, it's one of those things that makes perfect business sense, just from the cost savings. But guess what? When you offer a free college education to your employees and their employees' kids, guess what that does to attracting and retaining talent, right?
Oh, yeah.
They have 1/6 the level of turnover of a typical, employer, in a pretty high turnover industry.
I was gonna say, let alone the hospitality industry, which we all know is, forget COVID. I mean, it's just high turnover no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of Mr. Rosen, I know you had him speak at we're coming on doing this interview on the heels of your Health Rosetta conference. I believe you call it. I think this year was it the future.
The Future We Choose.
Future
Yeah.
We
so
Choose.
Just ripped
Right.
off the epilogue, and in fairness, there was a book written called The Future We Choose.
There you go.
I like that concept. I think we are at this. We can choose to continue on the path we've done, but I believe this is this inflection point in society that is, and we're also having a generational shift. The largest generation in history are millennials. They're in their early 40s. Does anybody think that our status quo is remotely designed or optimized for probably what anybody wants, but certainly what millennials want? And in 5 years, they're already the biggest chunk of the workforce. 5 years, millennials, post-millennials are 75% of the workforce. So we're in a massive inflection point.
Yeah. Well, so coming on the heels of your conference, I work with so many Health Rosetta advisors. Folks are talking about something that you're calling the plan grader. Can you just give us a couple minute snapshot of what that is? I know it's not battle tested yet. It's being you're going to implement it with Health Rosetta advisors first, but what is that?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing a manual version of it, kind of through a survey and stuff. So it's sort of battle tested from that standpoint for a couple of years. It's part of the application process. You submit a plan, your best plan, as part of the application process, and also to renew, you do that. But what we've done is we've taken the 40 most important variables to generate a score and millions of custom recommendations for the specific community, geography, employer, to needed to craft a high performance plan. And so that's what we're coming out with. We will use that internally to begin with. The conversations we've had earlier about being able to score and certify plans and being able to differentiate ABC from Acme Corp plans. This is foundational to that. Because the fact is, when we score status quo plans on our scoring, it's pretty rigorous. I think the highest score, we'll probably index it, but right now the highest score that we have of anybody is 72. So it's a pretty stringent scoring. The status quo plans some of them are going to be in single digits in terms of their score, and people are paying Cadillac prices for Pinto Health outcomes. And so we need to shine a light on that.
Well, look, man, you've said it all. I really appreciate your time. We've even gone a little longer than I usually do. So thank you for all those that are generously taking their time to listen to us today. For folks that want to reach out to you, if they want to join the movement or potentially try to join and go down that road, it sounds like you said the application process opens up once a year, and it's usually in the first couple months of each new year. Yes?
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. And they can find you obviously on Twitter. That's how Fox found you.
Right.
But they can also find you on LinkedIn. Yes?
Yep. LinkedIn is definitely, that's probably what I'm most active on from a social media perspective.
Perfect. Perfect. And once again, healthrosetta.org is the website. And look, just like you have a team of awesome rock stars behind you that help you on a day-to-day basis. I just show up and ask the questions. So I always give credit where it's due. I'm no podcast producer. So for everybody behind the scenes at the Rockstars Rocking podcast, I'm Eric Silverman. That, my friends, is Dave Chase. And Dave, I wish you a great day, and I appreciate you coming on. And for everybody listening, thank you as always for listening, or on YouTube for watching.
Excellent. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, bud.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Rockstars Rocking podcast. If you haven't done so already, make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you consume podcasts. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review. 5 stars would totally rock. Until next time, Rockstars, keep rocking.